Pain is my power. The Crow City of Angels stars Vincent Perez, Mia Kirshner, and is directed by Tim Pope. So after I reviewed The Crow, I really had no intention to do any of the sequels because by and large the sequels they just pale in comparison, really. But there is something to be said and discussed, I think, about the sequel Crow City of Angels. I recently watched this. This is the UK version, and I highly recommend getting the UK version because A, it is the director's cut, and B, it's a better picture quality version than the Echo Bridge version. But this isn't really a director's cut, and we'll get to that. And let me preface this review by stating that writer David Gower, who also was the assistant writer of The Dark Knight, and the director Tim Pope, they have totally disowned this movie. This movie is not a direct representation of the movie that they wanted to put out. The original movie they wanted to put out was over 2 hours long. Now, when a director puts out his first draft of a product, sure, it's more than likely going to be 2.5 hours. So I'm sure the overall intended version would have been just shy of 2 hours. And the real reason they disowned this version is because their original intention was to not copy the first movie. Out of respect for Brandon Lee, they wanted this movie to look and feel visually and story-wise completely different than the original. The producers, specifically Harvey Weinstein, stepped in and said, no, let's make this movie pretty much a copy of the first movie. And so they edited it down, and they even reshot a couple scenes. And so this version of the movie is just barely an hour and a half. And it's a real shame because we will probably never see the intended version of the film. That version will never see the light of day, more than likely. But we did see Halloween 6, the producer's cut, so anything's possible. So the story of the Crow City of Angels picks up a few years after the first Crow. Sarah is a character in this movie, and she moves from Detroit to Los Angeles. And the main character in this movie is Ash Corbin, played by Vincent Perez. Originally, they wanted the character's name to be Michael Corbin, which is a character in the Underworld series. Funny enough. But they thought Michael Corbin sounds too much like Eric Draven, so they ended up going with Ash Corbin. So the story goes in this movie, Ash's son Danny, he sees a murder happening by this group of drugged out criminals, and they want to get rid of any witnesses, and the witnesses in this case are Ash and Danny. So the Crow resurrects Ash out of the water, and he has come back to make the wrong things right. Now, I tend to have a love-hate relationship with this movie. There are things that are really great about it, in my opinion, and then there are things that are just horrible. First off, I really love the way this movie looks. It still has kind of a gothic tone to it, but it's not like the first movie. It's not black and white. There's tons of colors in this movie. There's reds, there's yellows, there's purples, there's all kinds of colors. And it really looks like LA. Instead of a rainy atmosphere like the first movie, this one has more of a kind of smog or foggy type atmosphere. And visually, I just think that makes the movie look stunning. And from watching this movie, you definitely get the feel that Tim Pope is a visual director. First off, the resurrection scene when Ash comes out of the water. That is just a jaw-dropping scene. It's beautiful to look at. And there's so much emotion that you can read into that scene. I mean, really, this is the type of movie that you could turn the sound off and you might enjoy the movie even more. It's just a beautiful movie to look at. And I also love that they used, practical sets. They used miniatures. And you know what? I just appreciate the hard work that goes into those type scenes. Nowadays they don't really do that much because, everybody uses CGI. And I just think when you use, sets and miniatures, it just adds more depth to the scene and it adds more character to the scene, really. Also, I really like Vincent Perez in this movie. He didn't try to completely copy Brandon Lee. He gave the movie his own style. And some might say that he is a little overdramatic with some of the scenes. There's a few scenes where it almost seems like a theater performance, like you're watching a play or something.
All your nightmares rolled into one!
But you can tell the guy really knows how to act. It's just not your conventional cinematic style of acting, if that makes any sense. But the bottom line is I am completely invested in his character throughout his journey in this movie. Also, I really love that scene between him and Sarah where he first becomes the Crow because he doesn't know what he is. And Sarah tells him, hey, you're here for a reason. You're here to make the wrong things right. Kind of a way to help him cope with the situation. She uses Danny's paints to paint up Ash's face like the crow. And I thought that was a nice touch. But let me just sidetrack here for a sec. This is one of the scenes that you can tell that this movie has just been chopped up. Because this scene and a lot of the scenes in the movie, when you're watching it, it does feel kind of disjointed. It feels like a lot of the scenes are cut short. And I think that's one of the big problems of the movie is it doesn't breathe. The scenes don't really play out effectively. And so you're really hooked into a scene and then you're yanked from the scene, prematurely. One of my favorite characters in this movie is Sarah, played by Mia Kirshner. Mia Kirshner is one of those actors in the 90s that I might have had a crush on. But she emotes so much expression through her facial expressions and especially her eyes throughout most of her scenes in this movie. And she's also really Ash's guide throughout this journey. And I really did like Ash's and Sarah's relationship in this movie. That was one thing that was a little different because it was kind of a love story. And throughout the movie, you can tell that Ash is conflicted because he's here for revenge. He's here to revenge the death of his son, and then he wants to go back to the grave. But then he's having all these feelings for Sarah. It's interesting to see how that plays out in the end of the movie. Another thing I really liked about City of Angels is the soundtrack and the score. Graham Revell, who did the score for the first movie, he uses a lot of similar cues in this movie, but he also adds kind of a tribal type feel to some of the scenes, and it just works really well. And also, this is one of the better, rock soundtracks, just like the first movie. And they're all placed so well in the movie, especially the scene where Ash is becoming the crow and he's putting on the coat, and they use a song by Filter called Jurassitol. And man, that song just fits perfectly with that scene. And also near the end of the movie, the band Deftones actually are playing live in the movie. And I believe this was like right around the time they did their first album. But the song itself is kind of chaotic and it really fit with the whole situation that was going on at the time. But really, this is a soundtrack that I still play to this day. It's just a great 90s rock soundtrack. Okay, now let's talk about the bad in this movie. And really the major thing that irks me to hell about this movie is the characters, especially the druggies. All the characters in the first movie, at least the bad guys, they were interesting. They all had kind of a story to each character. This one, they are just really loud and bombastic and not in a good way at all. And also, they can't act for the most part. Now, Thomas Jane, who was actually in The Punisher, he's in this movie as a completely different type of character than he normally plays. Yeah, his acting's not bad, but he's only in the movie for a bit. But Iggy Pop is not a good actor, and he is in a lot of this movie. He does have some potential in some scenes, but he is always turned up to 10, and some of the scenes that works, but some of the scenes he needs to take it down a notch because it's really distracting. But I mean, I could go down the list of every character and tell you what I don't like about them, but all in all, it's just they're really bad actors. Now, the character Judah Earl, played by Richard Brooks, he is not a bad actor, but his character is really just kind of uninteresting to me. I mean, really, he seemed kind of like a cheaper version of Top Dollar, played by Michael Wincott. And Michael Wincott is just a much better actor than Richard Brooks. So in its current state, I'm gonna give Crow City of Angels a humdrum. But I'm so curious to see what that intended director's cut version is. And it's a shame that we'll probably never see it. In its current state, it's really just a case of style over substance, unfortunately. But it's still a movie that from time to time, it still kind of draws me back in. So anyway, guys, what are your thoughts on the Crow City of Angels? I know there are a lot of mixed thoughts on this movie. I could definitely see that there's a vision there, which I appreciate. But like I said, I would love to see that intended version. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Humdrum out.